Welcome to this edition of the Energy Jurist. I am your host, George Amos, and with me here is Dr. David Editang. He's the current General Manager, Government Relations and Stakeholder Management of FedTech Group, with branches in Nigeria, Ghana, Angola, and Uganda. He is a local content expert with decades of experience in the oil and gas sector. We're happy to have you on board today, sir.
All right, thank you very much, George. I'm also glad to be your host. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So today we are discussing the topic local content in Nigeria, domestic crude obligations, local content growth, and local content legislation. So we're starting with domestic crude obligations, sir. So our first question is, how can Nigeria successfully enforce domestic crude supply obligations? Because as we know now, these obligations relate to the upstream sector operators, licensors, and licensees. And what I believe the obligations involved are ensuring a consistent supply of crude oil to domestic refineries and also promoting local refinery capacity and supporting growth of the downstream sector. So, sir, how can these obligations be achieved to ensure that there's local growth in the sector?
Well, thank you very much for that question, and it's really timely. Of course, we know the criticality of the question and what's really happening in Nigeria concerning the Dangote and the crude for Naira. You understand? So, in a nutshell, just for my viewers, the Nigerian domestic crude supply obligation, it's a policy that required oil and gas company in Nigeria to allocate a certain portion of the crude oil production for local refinery before exporting the rest. And this has been strengthened by the PIA, as we know. And the goal is basically to ensure there is a steady supply of crude oil or domestic refinery,
Absolutely.
reduce reliance of imported petroleum products, and enhance energy security.
Yes.
And critically, we know that there are some challenges, and we won't want to we won't want to pat ourselves at the back. There are challenges, and this one of the challenges I would say, it's strengthening of regulatory framework, because we have a situations whereby the NUPRC, we have the situation because the key regulatory functions or the authorities, the key regulatory bodies for this that mounts on this are the NUPRC and the NDPRE. But we want to see whereby there are stiffer penalties
Yeah.
for non-compliance, because we see where there's a default from either the government, and we know that now for now NNPC, which we know it's a private company, but yet we have some level of, because the major shareholders are the government. So we see whereby they are calling off, for instance, the case study with the Dangote. It was in the news that the initial period that was given for Dangote has elapsed, and Dangote said, they had stopped, and that will have ripple effect on the economy of price increase of volatility and pressure on the dollar and all of that. So I think policy, regulatory policy framework, if there are stiffer penalties for non-compliance, whether be the government, whether be it the private investors, talking about the oil company or refineries, I would also advise, um, you know, um, advise these two institutions to do something borrow relief from what NCDMB did in the SAL, so SLAs rather. So where you have the service level agreement, and it says to say, okay, for instance, if we default, there are instant penalties. If we sent a document for approval and it don't get to you by this time frame, you consider that for an approval.
Yes.
You know, how can we have sort of framework whereby if there's a deficiency in one part for the contractual obligations, there can be an urgent or an automatic penalty or
Mhm.
automatic solution. So we're looking at that. I think it mostly falls on the regulatory framework. And the second thing we'll look at is ensuring adequate refining capacity. And this also is also a challenge. We need to encourage private sector investment in the modular refineries. Yes, I think because of this crude for Naira and also domestic obligation, we saw new entrants into the
Yes.
market, and we
Mhm.
saw licenses were given to modular refineries. And I think for it, I think it was a good step, at the backdrop of the PIA. But here again, and the government it's like we're about to stall what we started nicely. I wrote about this few days in on the LinkedIn profile and in my social media handles. And I said the good start which we did, we're about to mess it up because this will also lead to price volatility. It will need to pressure on on the FX, and it will get us back to where we were again. Thank you.
Yes, sir, because you spoke about penalties, like stricter penalties, because the NUPRC issued the production curtailment and domestic crude supply obligations, which is a mechanism for enforcing domestic crude supply obligations, and it also provides penalties for non-compliance. So I do believe that, given what you've said so far, that these penalties would at least encourage strict adherence to the obligations, sir.
Absolutely, they will, and the will to do this is some other thing. So we need to actually the willpower, the political will to give these stiffer penalties for this because we know our mainstay. Our mainstay is the petroleum sector, the energy sector, and any any disruption in that ecosystem has a way of is a hydra headed. It has a way of affecting all, our GDP, has a way of affecting our economic ecosystem. So it's a sector that the government should, for policies, the government should be very strict on policies to arrive at a successful end. It's a law. This is a law that has been there, since 2010. So many things has changed. So quite a number of things have changed. And I think when I say it's multifaceted, we need to look at policy reforms. We need to look at capacity building. We need to look at strategic collaboration. But let me take strengthening of the local content policy because it all starts and ends with with the policy framework. Now, I think there should be um, uh, we all know that the Nigerian Content Act was repealed, and we are hoping that it would include the new one, as we anticipate, would include what additions from or reviews from key stakeholders. For instance, we know that there are some lacunas in some definitions in some of the clauses. Well, we're looking at that because if these lacunas are not well defined and to the common man's knowledge, it creates a multiple or more multiplicity of argument or
Yeah.
multiplicity of interpretation. So
Mhm.
I think the policy should actually be enforced
Okay.
now, because if you have a more stricter Nigerian Content Act, it will ensure compliance. Now, there should be clear local content target. We need to we need to tell ourselves the truth. This law has been there since 2010. Well, where are we on fabrication? Where are we on welding? Do we really have this capacity? I think a more robust industry survey or more robust industry landscape audit should be done to know where we are. We've had a couple of legacy projects. Have we benefited from this legacy project? Have there been the multiplier effect? Because at the back of every legacy project there should be some investment springing out. Now let's assess this. Have we really, we had the Gina, yes, some fabrication yards were springing out here and there. We had T7, but for the T7, what has been, there's still some percentage to be completed, but has there been that really impact on the local content? This is a question we need to answer,
Yes.
and monitoring and enforcing of penalty is critical. And we need to look at developing local skill. But because when you talk about stagnation, yes, from IOCs we say we don't have the required skill set. I mean, the local company don't have the required skill set. Now, I like to give an example, and I've said this in different forums. We need to develop local workforce,
Okay.
and there should be a handshake between the academia and the companies. If there is no handshake between the academia, I'm talking about research and development, and the local companies, we can end up where we are. But if there is this, this good handshake, we could have so much more. We need to develop engineers. We need to develop homegrown technology for our homegrown market. These are
Mhm.
the things we need to look at. Promote knowledge. This is a critical thing. There has to be technological transfer. How well do we follow through for this technological transfer? Because you see the IOC now, we've seen the big players now we see few days ago, Renaissance there was a change in flag for Renaissance from the Shell we used to know to
Yes.
Renaissance. Now, this about we saw the change of flag from the ExxonMobil we need to know to Seplat.
Mhm.
Nigerian guys or local guys are filling into the shoes, but there has to be mandatory technological transfers. So NCDMB, I would say the regulatory body needs to be hard on this technological transfer. We also need to promote R&D. Every nation, for this kind of industry in which we find ourselves, every nation thrives off, on R&D. The Schlumbergers of this world, the bakers of this world, the G's of the world, they all thrive on R&D.
Mhm.
Why can't us as a nation, I mean Nigeria, why can't we take our R&D very serious? Because if we don't take, R&D serious, we end up where we used to be.
Yes, definitely.
Um, yeah. So now another thing, it has to be improve infrastructure, ease of doing business. Can we reduce bureaucracy? Can we reduce bottlenecks? Like simplifying licensing processes, simplifying permits, approval. We all need to look at this, and we need to look at it holistically, because these are little chunks or little foxes, that affects or would say stagnate the local content, targets. Now, another thing we need to look at, how well do we foster private and public partnership and collaboration? No one in this industry, well, I'm talking about the energy industry does not survive idly. There has to be international collaboration. That's why we always say Nigeria content is not about Nigerianization. We can't do without the expert. Really, we can for now, we can't do without technology. We can actually not do without technology. We cannot do without, collaboration. But what we are saying, can we bring this collaboration and domicile and domesticate all this into our country? So we need to encourage joint ventures. We need to encourage
Foreign
collaboration
investment.
with international
Mhm.
collaborations. And I think if we follow this roadmap, I think we would find with good compliance, with good monitoring, if we follow this roadmap, we would find ourselves increase we'll find a rapid increase in the local content or the local targets and compliance level.
That's brilliantly put, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Because what I noticed was the year 2023, when the NCDMB actually had the 54% increase. It originally set a record, it set a target of 47, but the 54 apparently beat that record. So it does tell a good story that there is a potential for us to grow. And given the recommendations you've put forward, I do agree that those targets can be further surpassed and we can
Yeah,
definitely achieve more growth in the sector.
absolutely.
Yes. So to our third point, that is local content legislation. And we are going to discuss the presidential directive on local content. Now, it's a very, very intriguing directive, honestly, because it has different aspects to it. First, it enforces local content requirements. That is the NCDMB must consider the efficiencies of the in-country capacities, and then also establish ways to ensure that it doesn't bog down local companies that are trying to operate in the sector. Then it should also have a clear plan for approving operations in the sector. Now, sir, we are considering how effective this directive would be to give local companies an opportunity to thrive in the oil and gas sector, because you mentioned in your previous point how to simplify processes, because two aspects of that are easier contracting cycles, as you'll find companies have a quicker way to complete contracts, to begin their processes, to execute projects, and at the same time, promote local service companies that are just starting out, but also need to conduct research, need capital and funding. So how does this directive give them an opportunity, a platform to get themselves out there and to boost their business to, grow in the oil and gas sector?
All right. So the PD, that's the Presidential Directive, as we'll call it, is called the PD. It was introduced in March 2024, and it actually took a bullish approach to shorten oil and gas project approval timeline, because formerly we had one of the critical problem or the critical issue in this industry was contracting cycles. So a tender can be launched out today in 2025, and maybe before the contract could be executed, or start of it might be 3, 4, 5 years later. So there was a huge challenge with contracting cycle. So what this PD did, it had to shorten the oil and gas pool, because that also would scare investors. That also would affect the rolling of projects, within the and rolling of FIDs within the industry. So the PD, we must salute the government of President Tinubu and it's all his wisdom to institute this, at least institute this PD. As a result of this PD, we've seen some FIDs, but we've seen a couple of FIDs. As a result, it has restored some level of investors' confidence.
Yes.
And NCDMB has done also the part. NCDMB has reduced the touch point. When we talk about touch point, is approval processes, approval lines or gates, as we call it. So NCDMB, as a result of the PD, has reduced the gates from 9 touch point to 5 touch points. So it reduced from 9 to 5, thereby reducing the days allotted to NCDMB on the cycle. And it actually, what this did was to eliminate intermediaries with no demonstrable capacity from the tendering cycle, because the tendering circle initially was filled with so much of bureaucratic cycles. That's what was responsible for the elongation of contracting cycle. So what the PD did in its wisdom from the president, the PD helped to shorten this to about 6 months, so you can be definitive. So you see projects moving, you see the start of the process and the end of the process. You can actually, it gives some predictability to investment. But another way, on the flip side of it, something you understand, the PD is a directive. Now we also need to understand the presidential directive is a directive.
Yes.
Nigeria content law is a law. So
Yes.
there's a difference between a directive and a law. Now, what it means, the PD has to be in alignment with the law. So now I want to take you to an issue on the PD. What I see is this. Now, the PD talks about removing of intermediaries.
Yeah.
The section talks about intermediaries, talk about the local content now. But you see, you can't really take away intermediaries as it were, because intermediaries in our sector, we talk about distributors, we talk about representative of OEMs. So now, what it means, you can't really take that out, because some business models run on the OEM model or run on a representative or partnership model. So that means you wouldn't have, because of cost structure, you wouldn't have maybe a manufacturer having manufacturing plants on every country. So what they do a representative model, whereby they have representative of the product in that country. But I think the PD talks about removal of all this, all of these intermediaries. But I think there again, we need to, deal with it really, really critically, because I think NCDM in its wisdom should look at contractors or service company with demonstrable capacities. So that means what the PD is saying to us is that we need to take out, I agree, definitely we should take out briefcase contractors, because we've had some guys that had worked on the model of being a briefcase service company with maybe about low overhead, maybe 2 staffs, and they've been working on that model for like 20 years. But the wisdom of this PD is saying that, hey guy, instead of being a distributor for 20 years, are there no value addition you can put within that value chain? Either by shipping, either by assembling, either by manufacturing, some sort of value enhancer within the value chain. So the presidential directive is a good one. I would commend the president, but local content, our local companies should take advantage and produce more value at the back of this. And also this also to give maybe an advice to the foreign companies or the IOCs, because for instance, if there is no, if they are lacking in if there are capacity shortage in a particular sector,
Yes.
the reason why we have legacy project is that at the back of such projects, for instance, let's give an example. If there is no capacity for a galvanizing plant, there is, but I'm just giving an example. We want to see equipment being bought. We want to see IOC mentoring our local company, walking them through through the ropes, making sure they have the requisite capacity. So when we have such project next time, we won't have to go off the borders of Nigeria in search of this equipment, in search of this
Exactly.
capacity.
Yes.
So what I see is that instead of at the least, instead of looking for exemption, to go out and get this capacity, can the IOC look at ways whereby they can develop local companies or local companies to get this capacity, so subsequent projects we won't have to go outside. So because if at every point in time we write for waivers, we'll end up not having capacities
Yes.
within our society. So we need to look at this, and we need to take even as much as we're looking at the PD, we also look at the law, which is Nigerian content. So it's hard to take cognizance to the law, which involves in building capacity and capability within the oil and gas space. Thank you.
That's very brilliant, sir. Thank you for that, because it definitely is a crucial step. It definitely underlines the importance of not only seeking external help, but also developing our own local systems to ensure that we don't always have to rely
Absolutely.
on foreign companies and foreign corporations to get the job done in-house. So, sir, just a
Absolutely.
final thing. Can we get your closing remarks? Maybe just a statement on local content in the oil and gas sector in Nigeria, recommendations for local companies, and perhaps a comment on the new Nigerian Oil and Gas Opportunity Fair that has been launched by the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring.
So yeah, so I would say without projects there is no local content.
Yes.
Without capacity there is no local content. Are you understand what I'm trying to say? So without project, no local content. Without
Mhm.
capacity, no local content.
Mm.
So I would advise local content. It is actually not a sprint; it's a marathon,
Yes.
like NCAA always says. So we would get there, but we need to show commitment. We need to show political will. We need to show strengthen our legislative. And I also think that with the successes being made, there have been clamor with the success being made on the NCDMB, there should be a replication of these same successes in other sectors of the economy. So we
Yeah.
have local content in the manufacturing sector. We want to see it being played in the construction sector. We want to see it being played in the in the industry. So can they all see a way whereby we've had this talk for quite a number of while, replicating this model, but can we now put this into work and make sure this is success, because Nigeria is ours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for being my guest for today. I really appreciate your time. It was an honor and a privilege having you with us at the Energy Jurist, and we look forward to further opportunities of interviewing you, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you, George. It's a pleasure. Let's buy the naira. Use the naira and buy the naira. Let's buy our product. Let's increase local content. Without local content, our GDP will be stuck at where it is. But with local content, it will definitely increase. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely, sir.